What is up? What is up, everybody? It is me, Mike Vanderpool, aka Get Good Dad, and I'm going to talk today about the film Bye Bye Barry. Do they answer the question, why did Barry quit? That's debatable. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Barry Sanders is my all-time favorite running back, my favorite all-time Lions player, and honestly, the reason that I'm a Lions fan. I'm the director of a film called Heart of a Lions Fan, which I made, which explored how I became a Lions fan. It was through making that film that I understood and realized why I am a Lions fan, and Barry Sanders in 1991 season, a huge part of that. So I'm going to talk about the film. I'm also going to talk about Barry. I'm also going to talk about something cool that happened because of this film to me. I'll talk a little bit about my film and all that kind of good stuff, along with some of the aftermath of what's going on with Bye Bye Barry film and the reaction. So number one, Barry Sanders is just incredible. If you have not seen Barry Sanders highlights, you have to go watch it. There are a ton in this film. Some of you may have seen most of them, but me, I don't remember watching Barry Sanders live or on TV. I can't picture any of those plays from back in the day. And maybe it's the replays that I've seen that have kind of clouded all that up. But I actually was at a game where Barry Sanders played. Miami Dolphins came to the Silverdome in 1991. My neighbor took me to that game. I remember going. I remember that I was there. I think I remember what he was wearing, a Miami's Dolphins starter jacket. Can't remember if his son with us or not. I don't know if I think his kids were younger, so maybe he took me because he was a Miami Dolphin fan and knew I was a Lions fan. My dad wasn't around. My stepdad wasn't into this stuff. Yeah, I was at the Silverdome when Barry Sanders played, but I don't remember anything. 1991, I don't remember much of the season either, other than the very first game we played against Washington. I was probably sitting in my grandmother Sally's den with a TV on top of a furniture-style TV, and we got clobbered by Washington. Somehow, we had a great team, ended up making the playoffs, beat Dallas. I don't remember that either, other than replays that I see now. But I do remember the gut punch feeling of losing to the Redskins that second time we played them when we played them in the playoffs for the second time that year. I can still feel that gut punch, man. I didn't know it then, but that's when I became a Lions fan. Long story short, kind of fell out of it for a while, didn't pay too much attention. In college, got reconnected through a friend who was into the games and stuff like that, and then became a rabid Lions fan during the Joey Harrington era. And then my son was born, and I had been a somewhat angry and mostly miserable Lions fan for the majority of my life. And I asked myself the question, hey, do I want to raise my son to be a fan of the Detroit Lions? Hence the film Heart of a Lions Fan, which is on YouTube right now. You can watch it for free. Met all kinds of awesome people, interviewed lots of folks, from people on the street to some long-timers, old-timers like George Blaha, Steve Courtney, Frank Beckman, Ron Cracchiola, Uperman, Lion Eyes, Big Lion Mane, Superfan, Detroit Don, Bluebeard, like the motley crew of Lions fandom. And I've fell in love again with the Lions and going to the games and doing some of the tailgating stuff. I don't do it as hardcore as everybody else because, one, I'm not in that position yet in life. But I feel like I made the right choice, and that was confirmed this year when I took my son to his first Lions game. We went to a preseason game first because just want to make sure it was going to be cool. And we went to the Chicago game, man. We're at that Chicago game, and he is he's somewhat into it. But I'm feeling a little deflated there near the end of that game. My son's sitting next to me. I couldn't give up. I couldn't let him see me give up. So every third down, I'm up and cheering, even though I was kind of a little irritated and didn't want to. And when we came back and won that game, right, my son saw what it means to never give up. And he is a hardcore Lions fan. The next morning, he is singing Forward Down the Field. I got him a Hutchinson jersey. Hutch is his favorite player. And I also introduced my son to the film Bye Bye Barry. So we watched that, and I'm going to show you. Let's roll the clip of his response here. So what are we doing, Goose?
Seeing why Barry Sanders had retired.
And what do you want to say?
I want to say bye to him. I really miss Barry Sanders.
So an emotional, awesome kid, just phenomenal. But I'm able to share something with my son here, something that we love, Detroit Lions football. Very similar to what we see in the film Bye Bye Barry, of Barry Sanders' father's love of football being something that he shares with his son. Now, my movie, Heart of Lions fan, Bye Bye Barry, yeah, there's stories about football, but more than anything else, there's stories about fathers and sons, man. There's stories about families, there's stories about community. And I think that they did a phenomenal job in this film. Now, do they answer the question, why did Barry quit? That's debatable. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But they do a phenomenal job of telling the story of who Barry Sanders is, how his father and his relationship with his father impacted who he was, and maybe what went into the decision, Barry's decision to retire. Now, I'm not going to debate the merits of how Barry retired, sending in the fax, whatever. That's water over the bridge, water under the dam. In the heat of the moment, spur of the moment, when you're making an emotional decision, you just do the best that you can. And sometimes you might not make the best decision. Sometimes it's a phenomenal decision. But I can tell you this, no matter what you do when you make an emotional decision that impacts a lot of people, then not everybody's going to be happy. So there we go with that. But cinematography on this film is phenomenal. The storytelling is awesome. The way that they hop back and forth through Barry Sanders' career and timeline is nice too. They don't do it chronologically. They intermix some of what he was doing as a college player. Then they go into his pro career. Then they talk about the Heisman when they're talking about how Barry shy or didn't like the spotlight, for lack of a better way to say it. We talk about Barry setting the single season record and get to that point without talking about Mike Utley. But during that, they bring up Mike Utley when they're talking about what happened to Reggie Brown. And then we get to that 99 season, and there we have a whole bunch of stuff where we're looking at how Barry feels when you put your everything into something and you no longer find joy in it. And I think as I watch this film and as I listen to William Sanders, Barry's dad, talk in interviews, as former players talk and Barry himself talk, I really think that Barry just lost his love for the game. I'm not going to try to compare myself to Barry Sanders in any way, shape, or form, but playing basketball growing up, that happened to me. My dad was a pretty good basketball player. Never really forced me to play basketball. Never really compared me to or himself to me like Barry's dad did to him. But when I quit basketball, the person that I had that I thought about the most during that decision was my father, and how I was going to tell him and do that. And even, that minuscule decision of me that only impacted kind of me and my coach, some of my teammates and my dad, it just not even compares to obviously what Barry had to do, and when the thousands, if not millions of people that were impacted by his decision. I think that the way that the film answers the question without directly answering the question is very interesting. I think that it's done very, very well. It's not like Barry comes out and says, yeah, ownership didn't want to pay people. Ownership sucked. Ownership broke up the team. Ownership didn't give us the players that we needed. But if you read between the lines, and I know Barry's worked really hard and then Lions have worked really hard to mend that relationship with him, I'm pretty sure if I had to pin it on one thing, it was ownership. I think all Lions fans, as we look back through the past, ownership has been the one common denominator of when we've been successful to when we've not been successful, as we were dealing with, the present of actually finding some success. So really great movie. I would recommend watching it. It's all ages can enjoy it. Fathers and sons specifically, sons and grandchildren and grandfathers specifically would also enjoy it. But a little bit of the aftermath and what's going on here. I'm going to wrap this up kind of quick and just maybe share a little screen here. There's this little scuttlebutt going on with Scott Mitchell, right? And there's a little bit of an interesting drop that Joe Montana could have went and played for the Lions, a conversation with Barry and Wayne Fontes later in life, and talking about how they needed a quarterback. And Scott Mitchell, former Lions quarterback. I didn't even read any of his posts. I knew he was on a couple of podcasts. I'm like, I don't need any of that negativity right now. In a great Lions season, let's forget about that. I think a couple of the people have said that as well. But let's go ahead and I want to look at something here and just talk about the quarterbacks that Barry had, because they don't name Scott Mitchell specifically, but they do talk, or they do mention the quarterback position. So there we go. If you look at like the 90s, right, we had Eric Kramer and Rodney Peete. Eric Kramer won that playoff game for us. Andre Ware, 3 quarterbacks over Barry's first 4 years, 4 quarterbacks, right? Then Scott Mitchell came in. Scott Mitchell played fairly well. Charlie Batch was in there as well. So quite a few quarterbacks that Wayne Fontes could have been talking about, right? None of these quarterbacks were amazing. And if we think about and look at specifically, the 95-96 season, which is when Scott Mitchell played the majority of games, Scott Mitchell did fairly well. I was surprised. He was number 2 in passing yards. We're not going to look at completion percentage and break it down like everybody else, but 32 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's kind of in line with the better quarterbacks of the day. 96, Scott Mitchell is right there in the top, I believe, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 11. But, decent amount of yards. But I think that year he didn't play every single game, right? He only played in 1996. He missed 2 games. So, maybe 96, he kind of had a little bit of an off year there comparatively. But 97, right? Where's he at? Where's Scott Mitchell at 97? Oh, right there, right? Top 7. 3,500 yards. Not as many TDs, so kind of fell off. But, not anything horrible. But I think that, when we look at Rodney Peete, not a stellar quarterback. Eric Kramer, not a stellar quarterback. None of these guys were stellar quarterbacks, but they were good. Scott Mitchell was good, but the team that they had, I think that they really needed somebody like a Montana or somebody with that leadership, because Barry wasn't that type of vocal leader. I think they needed somebody to lead this team on the offensive side, and that's going to be typically, traditionally, your quarterback, right? So, again, I'm not going to talk too much about Scott Mitchell and what he said and how he's feeling. That's great. Everybody can do their own things and yada, yada, yada. Make their own assumptions. I think it was just silly to bring that up. Why Scottie Pippen in the moment. But anyway, Mike Vanderpool, Harvard Lions fan, I think this is phenomenal. This Barry Sanders documentary, Bye Bye Barry, I highly recommend watching it. I've watched it 5 times. Each time I watch it, a little bit more comes through. Really enjoy all of the old footage, the old players that they introduce and talk to, Eminem being in it, Jeff Daniels. They do a really, really, really good job of bringing in a whole bunch of people to talk about the greatness that was the GOAT, Barry Sanders. And more than anything else, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Sanders, for the play on the field and the card that you put in my hand. Those of you that know. So, again, from Get Good Dad, a.k.a. Mike Vanderpool, director of Heart of Lions fan, appreciate everybody. Highly recommend. Go check out Bye Bye Barry on Amazon Prime right now. Be good to each other.